Uh, so the first one we had was how would each of us recommend that Covenant or players approach their Covenant climb since the release of Last Divinity, and how does this change if the player in question is stuck in a hump somewhere in the climb? So there's a lot of people who will be stuck trying to get consistent Covenant 25 wins, and we can still talk about that. But I think there's a large portion of the player base, especially a lot of people I interact with in chat, that are really stuck somewhere around the Covenant like 12 to 15 range, or they're stuck on a couple of those bigger humps, which are Covenants 10 and 20. Um, and so a question that I see very, very often is like, how would you recommend approaching clan selection specifically?
Yeah,
So some people wonder.
there's two schools of thought, and kind of my opinion is it really depends on what your goals are. If is your goal to just get to Covenant 25 and you beat the game? If that's the case, I would say find a clan combination that you do well in, and there are some strong ones, and you master what cards to look for in that clan selection. And in the process, um, when you do other clan combinations in the future, you'll still know what those key cards are. The other school of thought is if your goal is to play this game long term and just get good at the game in general, I think random is the best way to do that. There's so many cards and options I would have never learned to use well if I didn't force myself to use random.
I think it's interesting because how do I say this? You can't lose covenant level, right? There's no real risk. If you lose, you lost time, I guess. So I guess to Narninian's point, right? If these two school of thoughts exist, um, it's not like you're playing a competitive multiplayer game where trying out new ideas and failing, you're not hurting anybody else's game. You're not, other than maybe spending time, you're not going to get lower covenant level. So for me, I think this game is about experimenting. That's where the fun is. Like, you could copy my builds. You could go to my build guides and just copy them, but I wouldn't recommend playing that way. I think what makes Monster Train really fun is to explore. And so I'm much more in the camp of I think random, especially during the climb, makes a lot of sense. If you're trying to like fill out the rest of your clan combos, once you've gotten to 25, it's a completely different story. But I think the climb is I think it's the most fun when you're not necessarily so concerned about trying to win as you are about trying to build like insane stuff. And
So I have a slight counterpoint to those, and this isn't just me playing devil's advocate. I think there's one factor here that is really easy to overlook, and it's really subtle because it's not something that directly impacts you. It's those moments when you encounter a clan combo that you're not too familiar with and a covenant level that changes gameplay in a somewhat fundamental way simultaneously. And I think in those moments, what will often happen to players is they're pulled in two different directions and they're trying to learn lessons about these two new things that they're encountering. And what ends up happening is maybe they attribute some of the things that didn't work to the wrong new thing that they're encountering. And then they end up learning two bad lessons as opposed to two good lessons.
Yeah.
So my proposal is generally if you're looking to play the game long term, I wouldn't go random and I wouldn't stick to one clan, but I would do it a little more deliberately. Play in a grid pattern until you start to hit humps, and then start working on learning how to play those specific humps with a specific deck or a deck that you have an idea of how to play. Um, and if you find that you're really stuck on a hump, you also might want to diversify for a little while in that. Keep going along a grid and find what strategies interact with that new covenant level in profitable ways so you can determine what strategies are having trouble against it. There's certain covenant levels that interact with certain clan combos in very particular ways. So I would say climb in a grid pattern, and then every time you're approaching really significant covenant levels or you just get bodied by a new covenant level, go back to something a little more trusty for a little bit and see how you interact with it. And then, keep going back to a grid. It's kind of a combination of grid and then more familiar things, grid, more familiar things. There's also another merit to climbing pretty fast, even with clans that you're pretty comfortable with, because are you generally learning, really profitable lessons about certain clans if you're not playing at Covenant 25, if your intent is to play at Covenant 25 a lot. That's a thing I've seen a lot of people concerned with, like maybe a lot of the plays that or a lot of the runs that you've played with Awoken were at the earlier Covenant levels, and then you didn't play them later on. They didn't show up in the random a lot, or certain combos with them that have issues with certain things, didn't show up in random a lot. And then you get to Covenant 25 and you kind of just start flailing around, not because you're inexperienced with it, but because you have that tiny amount of experience with it at a lower Covenant level, but not enough at a higher Covenant level. And you don't realize what things became, higher value.
Yeah, like Demon Fiend no longer will solo the boss for you, right? Like stuff like that.
I think it's if I'm remembering back to when I climbed, I remember that because the game tells you what's the highest Covenant level you've ever beaten with this particular combo. It shows up in that bottom right corner when you're selecting clans. And I think if I remember right, I did exactly something that you mentioned, Viable. I looked and I would go through the clan combos and I would say, okay, which clan combo is currently the lowest Covenant level that I've done? And that's the one I would play next. So it wasn't random. That's
exactly what I did. Yeah. And one thing I've seen Gabriot do, and he's here, but is when he's failed. This is at Covenant 25. When he fails to run, he'll run it a bunch of times in a row, or at least he used to do that. And that seems smart, just to understand how you lose with that clan combination. But that's, I don't think, good for the Covenant climb necessarily.
Yeah, I think it's more good just for figuring out your own reasons why you might have lost a particular run. Though I think once, like Narninian and Nate, once you guys started offering to play seeds, I actually got more value out of that, just because I knew you guys wouldn't have any previous knowledge. Whereas for me, it's like I can try to ignore my previous knowledge, but it's always kind of there. I got, unfortunately, a pretty good long-term memory, so I just try, I'll know that I'm going to get X upgrade if I go one route. So it's better, I think, for me just to see one of you guys do it and just see how you beat it.
There's this weird thing too that, and I struggle with this as a content creator, that again, one of my favorite things about Monster Train is self-discovery. And I'm constantly at war with myself, especially with some of my guides, which are like very clear, like take this, combine these, do this. And I wonder if it's a disservice to the community to have so much clear-cut content, rather than, this is what I've been doing with a lot of my recent guides. A lot more recent stuff is just more general principles. These are general principles you can apply no matter what Covenant combo you do, and they're generally going to help you be successful. It's more knowledge-based because, again, like there's a huge and this is there's a post up yesterday. I actually commented on a post that came up yesterday, which was the Last Divinity inhibits builds and is very restrictive, and you have to play in certain ways. And I responded and said I disagree. I think if anything, it's forced you to reconsider what have been staple builds for a long time, which don't work anymore. There are some staple pre-DLC builds that don't work, and you have to pivot. And I think it's more, and this is why, maybe your recommendation is right. I think there's a good mix of like random, especially early on. Like early on, you're only going to have Awoken Hellhorn anyway, and then you're going to start unlocking clans. Like go random for a while. But I would say once you've unlocked all the clans, I think that grid pattern does make a lot of sense. Look for where you're the weakest and build up. If that's your goal, if your goal is to become generally strong at the game, that's the best way to do it.
There's another decision to make, I think, that didn't exist when we were Covenant climbing, which is, do you go for Last Divinity while you're Covenant climbing? Because that's a whole nother difficulty spike.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this. Narninian, it also it does the same thing that I mentioned before when you're playing clans you're not familiar with. If you're also, while you're trying to climb up and you're trying to deal with these fluctuations in difficulty, and you're engaging with rapid fluctuations in difficulty based on the number of shards that you take in a run, I think you can also end up learning 2 bad lessons as opposed to 2 good lessons, or as opposed to 1 good lesson.
On that point, Wormkin and Divinity at the same time for me was a real thing that I just avoided Wormkin for. That's why I avoided Wormkin, as I wanted to understand Divinity before I associated, this card is bad because Wormkin card is bad because I was struggling with Divinity on that run or whatever. So I do recommend trying to identify and separate the difficulty spikes, whether it's the clan combination, Divinity, or your new Covenant level.
Yeah, I mean, it's also something that's quite good about the design of the game in general. And again, it comes back to goals. Like, it depends on what your goal is. But if your goal is to, quote, master the game, mastering the game means you have to win with every single card, you have to win with every single clan combo, and you have to do it every time beating Divinity. And so if that's your end goal is to master the game, the only way you're going to do that is having a breadth of knowledge that can apply in all kinds of situations. And I think you only get that by diversifying the way that you play. And the question is, at what point do you do that? Because there's something to be said about like just saying, hey, I'm going to take a combo that I can do reliably, get it to 25, and then diversify and figure out everything else that comes at 25. Because there's exactly right. Like, you can have that moment where you're like, okay, I played Stygian at Covenant 15. It was fine. It worked really well. I went and played other stuff for the next 10 covenants, and then I came back to Stygian, and now it's a completely different world because Incant isn't quite as strong as it is at 25 as it was at 15, and so I don't know. I think there's some of that, but I don't know. I'm still a big proponent of general principles trump, specific just abusable setups.
Yeah, I mean the thing about we've all released guides on specific kind of combo like decks, and the thing is, if you just take those guides and just beeline towards those, and you don't get one of the pieces, and that's all you know, you're not going to win, and it's going to be frustrating because you're like, oh, this game's RNG is awful because I had a way to win, but I didn't get the one piece I needed. And yes, those are strong, but you have to be able to be flexible and do something else if you don't get it.
To that point, I actually had someone in my chat, Ripinator's hanging out right now, and he mentioned that he generally watches the guides for card evaluations rather than the actual deck builds. And I think there's a lot of merit in that. I think what's coming out when you're looking at card evaluations that are given in a more general way, or even you're given the specific information of how they relate to that clan, is you're given some of the fundamentals of the game that allow you to evaluate cards in specific scenarios yourself. And I think that's one thing that guides tend to miss, are how do you learn the fundamentals? And that's one thing that you pick up a lot of by facing loss, I think, while you're climbing Covenant. Maybe your sweet Awoken build that you really, really love has been doing well up until Covenant 12, and then you just find that enemies get too much health and you can't get the punch through just relying on your Sentient to be a frontliner, like your backline strats just weren't good enough. You don't have ways to sweep backliners, and you start getting bodied. I think that that's actually a good place to learn a lesson. I encountered some of those, not through loss specifically. I'm not sure if I lost a run while climbing Covenant, but there were definitely runs where I felt like, oh man, this thing I thought was really, really good is now not good, and I'm not sure it's ever going to be good again because it just doesn't work anymore.
Wait, you don't think you lost a run while climbing Covenant? That's impressive.
I lost a lot of runs.
Yeah, I don't think I lost any. Maybe one. I know I had at the time I had like win streaks going up through those. I guess I could actually like check because I never replayed. I never replayed Covenants like 10 through. Was like 10 through 15 or 15 through 20. So I can actually see what those are. But I definitely had runs where it was like I start getting bodied, and I felt like those were the ones where I learned a lot of lessons while climbing Covenant.
I think, and this is something that Amphi said in chat, on my chat, is he said he was going to do a review and then found out that most cards are good, and so it wasn't a very good review. And I think, so one of the things, and I got asked this, is do you always take your first do you always take a unit from your first banner? The answer is yeah, I do. I made it, it's almost a hard rule for me now, because I've been bodied so many times on Ring 2 fights where I don't have a banner unit. But in general, the concept of like, if you really want to have a wide knowledge of the game, you have to try every unit, and the best way to do that is to just decide you're going to take a unit every time. And especially now when you have essences, when you have all this kind of stuff, like there's no reason to beeline for a specific strategy rather than just try to make your run work. Like try to make it's the whole thing behind this Never Give Up series that I started, is this idea that every one run is winnable. Every single run is winnable. I'm almost 100% convinced. I don't know that every run is 300 shard Last Divinity winnable, but every run I think is winnable. And I think what's one of the unique things about Monster Train compared to other games, and this is also coming back to like why I think general knowledge trumps, is there is not a card game that has tactical combat like Monster Train does. Every other game's tactical combat is typically very head-to-head oriented, and there's nothing, I would say, how do I say this? Monster Train is a lot of like, you set something in motion from turn 1 that affects things in turn 10. And there are games that do that, but not to the level that Monster Train does, where you lose control. You lose control.
Even like Slay the Spire, like you have 6 cards and you have 1 enemy to attack. There's only so many ways that can play out, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, and because of the nature of having so many creatures and the way scaling works, there are lots of ways a single battle can play out.
And you don't get to make individual choices of what your units do. They do what they do. It's not Magic where I can choose not to tap my units. It's not Hearthstone where I can choose to slam them or not. It is they do what they do. You set them in motion and pray. And I think that there's something about that that's also I like this idea of like you have to tactically plan around this lack of control. You have an area where you have control, and then the game does what it does. And I think that this setup creates a very unique dynamic where replaying runs over and over again, even the same battles over and over again, you can have such different results because of minor deviations in play to a level I've never seen in another game before. And again, it's because of this lack of control. The game's going to do what it's going to do. And if I play my guy on top floor versus middle floor versus bottom floor, it's a completely different story in how the tactical combat plays out. And so this is where, for me, like, how do I educate myself on general principles that are going to be universally applicable across most of the other runs that I do in the future? And to do that, I think you can't stick with a single clan. I think you need to have wider knowledge. But that's not everybody's goal. Some people's goal is just to like tick the box. I did Covenant 25, and then they love the Covenant 1 meta. There's a lot of people, a lot of feedback that I've gotten of people that are just completely happy Covenant 1 meta, don't need to grind, or maybe they grind once, but then they're going to stay at Covenant 1, or daily challenge focused. I don't know. There's a lot of different kinds of players, but I don't know. I think that would be my recommendation, at least, is try to play broadly and try to get as many of the like basics understood as possible.
Yeah, and I think the best way to do that is, spread yourself out, but don't go pure random. Like that can lead you to scenarios where you climb Covenant levels with really strong combos, or you get into big ruts where you don't realize that it's an issue with the way you're playing against that Covenant level. It's an issue with, maybe the combination of clans you got and how those interact with Covenant level. That can teach you new skills, but I don't think it's going to teach you new skills as much as just playing in a grid. Spread yourself out, but do it in a very deliberate fashion, I think is going to be the best way to learn a lot of lessons as you're climbing. Also, force yourself into scenarios that you're uncomfortable with. I ran into a problem where I'm very averse to burnout builds. I love Melting Remnant, but I hate burnout builds. And I would just avoid them every single time I saw them while I was climbing Covenant, and even for months and months after I reached Covenant 25. And one day I realized I was losing so much value not knowing how to do them, because some runs I was just encountering nothing but a bunch of burnout units. It was just Paraffin Thugs and Lady of the Reformed everywhere. And I knew I was losing a lot of value because I wasn't taking banner units I often see other people taking, and I saw successful builds that I just didn't know how to make. I think embracing the archetypes within clans that you haven't interacted with yet is going to help you a lot as well. Try not to avoid anything.
Conversely, there are a handful of builds. If you're just trying to get to Covenant 25 and you hit like a really just bad, you're feeling bad, you're losing a lot. There are a handful of just like straight up brain dead builds you can do, and You can look at some recommendations. I mean, Narninian, you've posted some. I have posted some that anyone can win because they're so reliable and consistent and don't rely on drafts. And it can be helpful to just get a win. To like, if you're stuck at like Covenant 15 and you're just burned out because you've played 5 or 6 games in a row and every single time you're dying on Arcus, you're dying on Ring 5, just do a brain dead build, punch through it, get a win.
I kind of did that when I hit Covenant 25 the first time. I just want to win a couple times and then I'll explore. So I didn't re-roll for it, but I got an Inferno build and a Void Binding Trample set up pretty early on to get a couple early Covenant 25 wins.
I've also, and I think the overwhelming feedback is that the Covenant or the Shard 20 to 40 meta is significantly easier than pre-DLC Covenant 25.
Yeah.
I haven't done that myself, to be honest. I strictly go for Last Divinity. But I think that there's a nice sweet spot if a lot of players are struggling. This, again, 20 to 40 Shard, that means you're typically upgrading you're fusing one unit, maybe duping that unit or getting one spell-based upgrade that's really powerful. That seems to be like the spot where like the benefit and then the cost is so low that you barely notice it, but you can get really powerful builds running. So that might also be something to recommend if you're really struggling. Hit that like 20 to 40 shard mark and maybe it'll ease up a little bit. Not going for full Last Divinity, but getting some help against Seraph.
So it seems like generally me and Nate are on the kind of play with the grid type.
That's what I did when I climbed Covenant 25. So I can attest that worked pretty well for me learning the game.
And I guess actually an easier way to distill it for people to understand, go to the logbook and try to fill out the logbook, I would say is actually a good way to go through the process. I think you'll learn more by trying to fill out the logbook and incidentally climbing Covenant as you do it than you will by just trying to focus on climbing Covenant.
And that includes the champion paths. Like you should really, even if you don't want to use all the champion paths, should have knowledge of what the upgrades are. So just play through them once.
Gabriot,
any dissenting opinion?
I don't dissent with any of the opinions. I just think it really comes down to the temperament of the player. Like for me, I just don't pick things up very fast typically with games like this. So like for me, just hammering a single combo worked better for me to learn the game. Mm-hmm. To master it, I had to switch to random, but it was a long time for me before I could really play random in the base game. In the DLC, it's been fine just because I had all that game knowledge from before. But like, I couldn't imagine myself, for instance, learning Melting Remnant in the base game on random, just the way I learn. Like, I really have to, especially with like old patch, like Melting Remnant kind of had some weaknesses.
Harvest was really bad.
Yeah, Harvest was horrible. Other than like with Umbra, it was okay because your morsels like actually counted for Harvest, but then you also had the overcharged tank problem. But like my first real combo, I was able to consistently beat Divinity Covenant 25 in the base was Melting Remnant and Awoken.
Really?
Yeah, and
any guesses on what combo I was able to consistently beat Covenant 25 with?
Oh, I know it's got to be Awoken primary.
yeah. And that was the combo. It was literally any secondary.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, okay, Umbra, not Umbra, but...
So to Gabriot's point, I think that like if we're going to discuss specific scenario, because the question was, not just how would you recommend people climb in general, but how would you recommend people who are not stuck on humps climb, and how would you recommend people who are stuck on humps climb? And this is a point I've made in my chat a lot. I think it's actually better to go grid when you're not stuck, but use something a little more trusty, something you're a little more familiar with when you're stuck on a hump. That way you aren't being pulled in two different directions. You can learn the lessons of that specific Covenant level with something that you're comfortable with, and then you can go back to learning lessons about the clans after that, once you've figured out how to actually beat that specific Covenant level. So I would say go into grid, fill out the logbook. Once you get really, really stuck on a specific covenant level, play the things you're comfortable with, and then as soon as you beat it, go immediately back to the grid.
And for me, those weren't opposing goals, right? Like if I got stuck, I'd go do an awoken combo I hadn't done yet, or whatever, or that I've completed with a low level. So yeah, they don't necessarily have to be different strategies, but
yeah, you can definitely hybridize by filling out some of your secondary combos. That's a very reasonable way to approach that.
I think the last thing too, and this was something that I got commented a lot when I first started on the DLC. It was both during beta and during thing, and I wouldn't recommend people do this. So I mean, I started immediately Covenant 25. I did not touch lower covenants at all when DLC dropped and when it was in beta, and I wouldn't do that. If it were me, if I wasn't a player with as much time in the game as I had, I would recommend you start at Covenant 1 with Wormkin, for example, if it's your first time. Like, just get exposure on how the clan works and then bump it up. Don't do what I did. Like, I felt confident because I had, at the time, 1,200 hours in the game. Like, I figured I could jump in at Covenant 25 and be
I
okay.
have thousands of hours, and I still didn't grasp Wormkin right away. And that was mainly because I avoided it.
So this one I'm actually going to dissent from. I actually found it a little, not like problematic, but I found it a little counterproductive to see players who were engaging with the DLC on Covenant 1. I think that there's two approaches. One, you could learn the lessons of how do all of these cards work with these new mechanics. You can get a nice wide array of knowledge. But it might be more valuable to learn less, but learn things that are a little more important, which is which of these new cards and new mechanics actually work in the version of the game that you're going to be playing. And I think seeing which essences are absolute garbage on Covenant 25 is a little more valuable than learning all the essences on Covenant 1 and then determining which ones are garbage later. And get less experience with those less than optimal ones, which is going to cost you in scenarios where you don't get a lot of cards you want. Like if you don't see the cards you actually like, then you're not going to be as prepared to play those cards that you realized weren't as strong. But I think you're going to gain a little more in terms of your ability to like actually learn to beat Divinity for those first couple times and actually start winning those runs. And then it's a matter of, I know which cards are generally good and are generally going to work. When I see some portion of those, but not exclusively cards like that, I then take a few of the cards that I, think don't line up as well. And you mix those into some runs where you're doing pretty well and see how they work.
Yeah, I'd be wary of statements. I'd be wary of statements like this essence is garbage though, because obviously, like take charged. You get damage per charged echoes, and let's say you only get to 4 or 5 charged echoes every turn. That might seem not as powerful in essence, but then you get a build that generates 20 of them, and it's way better. So I mean, I think that you shouldn't make quick statements about.
I guess a more clear statement is how essences. It's better to learn which essences are significantly worse than others on the Covenant level that you're playing at, rather than risk that more, condensed power level of you're generally going to destroy Divinity on Covenant 1 or Seraph on Covenant 1. And I think what that does is it makes the cards feel a little bit closer when you're not having to stretch and strain to make a solid deck. So it's which essences have a bigger delta between Covenant 25 and Covenant 1, or which essences have a bigger delta between each other on Covenant 25, I think is a more important lesson to learn, just to get yourself kind of going on Divinity. I think that's a better way to approach it. That's going to be a tough one to discern, what's actually scientifically or philosophically the best method. But yeah, I think I would stick to the camp of Covenant 25 now when you're engaging with a small amount of new things. All right. Unless we have any other points, we can. All right, sweet. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the last point because I think this is a more interesting one to follow this up. So it was how do we recognize when we're going to have a high shard run and when we are on a run where we really want to hit like exactly 100 or 105 shards. So I think this is a really tricky question. It's something I struggle with because my approach when Last Divinity released was pretty much always to try and hit exactly 100. I even put in my guide to The Last Divinity, like, you should just generally try to hit exactly 100. But I see these runs where people just really pop off. Like once you've passed extreme threat level, you might as well start taking every single shard you can get your hands on. Obviously, you have the scaling on Last Divinity, but that's not nearly as significant as the jump in threat level. So I think there are really kind of these two key paths in the meta right now to beating Divinity. And one is go bare minimum, and then one is just go full ham on it and build something busted.
My opinion is maybe a little different than those two extremes, which is take the shards that are going to give you a big boost to your deck, right? So, like, there's no reason to go from medium to extreme because you're going all in if all you're doing is grabbing a minor boost to your deck.
Unless you're going for tournament score. But yeah.
Unless you're going for tournament score.
But no, you're
which is why
right.
I'm not going to do well.
So, so I did my journey. My journey has been, I was very much in the 100 to 120 shard meta, and then I took the advice of Carius and jumped into the 250 to 300 shard meta, and then I've now settled in more of a nuanced camp where I think Narninian is exactly right. I think it's all about what power are you getting out of the shards, and if it's not something that's going to dramatically change the performance of your deck, it's not worth it. And dramatically for me means either completely eliminating or mitigating a weakness, or filling a success criteria of the build. So oftentimes, like, things for me that I would say are like examples. If you have a deck that relies on getting your 2 priority units on the same floor as your champion by ring 2, Intrinsic on Space Prism dramatically influences the consistency of your deck. If you have a deck that, I don't know, you need to get damage onto your Eel Gorgon by ring 5 or by I don't know, by turn 3, you're going to play top floor, you need raw damage on your Eel Gorgon. Getting spell chain or getting an intrinsic or getting a holdover will dramatically impact the quality of your build. Certain damage spells, if you need your AoE as early as possible, like that's the logic for me. Or alternatively, if your build is going to rely on playing stealth every single turn, but you also have Ember Drain, then getting a -2 on your stealth is going to dramatically impact the quality of your build. So I think it entirely depends on, if it's going to be slightly advantageous, I would almost not do it. If it's going to dramatically impact, I would do it. For me, this is why I often don't take boons with coins. I take them in a very specific case, which is I know what I will buy with it immediately.
Yeah. Like multi-strike, you re-roll the shot for multi-strike, and you take the boons if it's
after.
There, right?
You take it after.
Yeah.
Right.
And artifacts as well. Like, I still tend to take almost every artifact, but there have been moments where it's like, is an artifact at this point going to make a difference in my build? Is there an artifact that I need? Or even several artifacts that I need? If not, then I don't even bother. And I think this type of evaluation, certainly in solo play, is important, but even more so getting into competitive play, I think this will differentiate the people that succeed and fail. When there's a no restart or a massive restart penalty going into tournaments, it's going to make a big difference. And I think in general, players should approach it like this. What is this doing? What is this doing? What is this?
And it's not even Divinity. Like, like maybe going from medium to high in Divinity is no big deal, but if you're high on ring 3 or 4, like, that can destroy you.
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of my criteria. It's like early on is, to me, the most impactful with shards. Like, if you get a lot of shards early, it's going to be a really hard fight. Like against Talos especially, you're looking at almost 20 damage, bunch of lifesteal. If you don't have the survivability for that, even if it's like a good infusion, you might want to hold off till later. I do, and you guys have already touched on it, but I do think that later, mid to late game, the shards almost don't matter at that point. You can go ham. I guess the other criteria that I jotted down was sometimes there are situations where I want to set up top, like my build just won't work mid or bottom, and I'm gonna have to keep my shards to a certain level in order for my wave to survive the sweeping attack. Like if I get 2 units infused with a steelworker, for example, I know I can survive 10 damage, so I gotta keep it 110 or below on the shards. I've had runs like that.
In most of my builds, and want to set up on the top floor. That's why I usually do around, a 120 max. But if I get crazy stuff, then I'm willing to set up lower, or I have a plan for dealing with the sweep.
So I think there's a lot of really interesting specific points like that, Gabriot, where like we discuss crossing specific thresholds, threat levels as you're climbing, but also damage numbers on Divinity. And those are a lot of things that are going to help people tackle shards specifically. I'm going to go with something, an answer here that I think is a little less useful to answering this specific question, but a little more broadly useful, which is there's a fundamental lesson to learn in professional card games, which is as you realize that you're not that well set up to win, it is better to actually increase variance than to reduce it. And when you feel like you're in a good position when it's better to reduce variance. Essentially what this does is there tend to be certain thresholds that you can cross that actually allow you to win the game. And in a game where either winning or not winning is the only thing that matters, in this case, it's winning a run or not winning the run that really matters. What will often happen is as you embrace some variance, the delta between your best and worst case scenarios broadens. Now, often this is really, really bad because what will happen is there are also thresholds to lose when you're in a good position, and you might be shifting the amount of area on your curve that is below that point. If you're in a solid position and you're embracing a lot of variance, it's why we tend to, approach things from a standpoint of, establish consistency, avoid variance. But if you're in a scenario in a card game, like let's say you're playing a game of Magic the Gathering, it's going really bad, and you only have a couple of outs. The way you win is getting those couple of outs regardless of how small the odds are. So it's best to increase the delta between your best and worst case scenarios and throw resources to ways to get those draws. Similarly, in a Monster Train run, there's this kind of feel to the game of you can have a feel for, are you ahead or behind the power curve of the enemies of the game right now? Or are you actually on track to get to a point where you can beat Divinity and Seraph, whatever modes of them you're facing? If the answer is no to either of those questions, then I would say you want to generally embrace variance, which often means taking shards or looking for stronger concealed caverns and stuff like that.
For me, that's taking trials that I know I'm going to take fire damage from to get an artifact. Right? That would be my approach. I don't know if shards are the right way to do it, though.
So
I think often it tends to work out that way. Sorry, Nate, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're just fine. I think Monster Train is a little bit unique compared to a lot of other games because so much of the variance is known at the very beginning. There's some things you don't know, and what you don't know what trials you will get. You don't know ring 1, 2, 4, 5, and 7 which boss you will get. It's not shown at the beginning. But you can have a pretty good idea of it. There's not like there's a lot of options. There's 2 different bosses per ring, so you're going to get one of the 2. And so the variance is not so wide. I think the issue is more lack of planning ahead that puts people in trouble because so much of it is known. We know, to your point, Gabriot, you said earlier, you know how much damage Divinity is going to do. It's not an unknown. It's not a random between 1 and 15. It's exactly what it's going to be. And with the variance is your deck. That's where the biggest variance lies, is your draws.
When do you draw your cards?
And so for me, this is a counter to like a typical competitive card game where your opponent and you both have RNG. It's just you. You know what will spawn within 1 or 2 options. That's basically it. Every floor of Divinity has one standard spawn, and then there's a couple of variants in some of the turns. And so you can know that, and if you know that, you can plan around it. And then it's a trade-off of, for example, can I sustain an extra 1 damage per turn from Divinity in order to reduce the variance in my deck? And that means taking a boon so I can remove another card, taking a boon so that I can get another artifact, taking a boon so that I can merge, or doing a last fuse, duplicating a unit. Like all of this comes down to, can I reduce the one source of variance in my game, which is my own draw, my own play? Can I reduce that variance enough to increase the difficulty in general? And it's a known difficulty. I know how hard it's going to be. And it's more, is the variance more risk, or is the general difficulty a bigger risk? And it's that level that I think, certainly I'm not at the level where I'm consistently evaluating that correctly. Like, I know that. But I think if you think in terms of just that like, this is all known. You know more or less what you're going to face. And it's, is my deck consistent enough? And if it's not, then I should trade a little bit of risk in terms of like, I could die earlier to reduce variance. And that's where I think that evaluation becomes really critical in a game like Monster Train, where you have that. You typically have in Ring 8 a lot of options to reduce variance, and all of them come with costs. And it's a matter of managing them appropriately. And I think this is the part where there's the most opportunity for growth. I mean, certainly earlier as well, but I think if you're just talking about going into Divinity, Ring 8 is an opportunity to reduce variance. And that for me is where you win or lose, is can you properly evaluate that in a way to say which risk is more acceptable, and then you go. And I don't know, it's for me, it's a different thing. Like when I was hardcore playing Hearthstone, it's very different because there's so much variance. You push the thing and you can get 9 different options for your hero, and then you have within that different build archetypes, so much variance you have to try to prepare for in a deck. Where Monster Train, I feel like it's not really about that. It's about your own deck and reducing the variance there, and not having to deal with a lot of external stuff. It's also, by the way, why I recommend that in future patches, I think we need more enemy content, because I think that's actually an interesting place for there to be more variance, where it's not right now. It's very consistent on the enemy side, and I think there could be an opportunity for Monster Train to vary up the enemy side a lot to make it a little bit more interesting. But as of today, I think that it's all about getting a deck that can be the most consistent it can be, and then you have to just calculate thresholds. How much damage can I survive? Can my Tethys survive, for example?
Like Divinity kind of has everything as far as monsters go. You have enemies that harvest, you have large amounts of units, you have big health units, you have units that you have to remove or bad things happen. So at least it's testing everything right now.
So I would say, while I do agree that Monster Train is a game that has less built-in variance than a lot of other games, I actually find it to be the game where weighting the value of embracing variance actually matters more than a lot of other games. So I guess I can give specific examples to kind of convey what I'm trying to explain here. So let's say you're going into Ring 8 and you have like a decent spell to upgrade with Emberstones. And you obviously have the Merchant of Magic on one side, you have Merchant of Steel on the other. But you evaluate that while that might be able to give you a way to actually win, what it's really doing is it's kind of shifting you to a place where you're really just more likely to lose by less. You're gonna come close to beating Seraph and Relentless, but it's not quite gonna happen. Or you're gonna be close to plugging up a leak, but it's probably not gonna quite happen. But the other side, on your Merchant of Steel, you have a specific unit that if you put Endless on, only Endless is going to be the thing that really gets you out of it. Your deck absolutely just starts to pop off, and you give yourself an extra 2 to 5% on that top end to actually win. I think that there's a lot of scenarios like that pop up, especially with Concealed Caverns, where you can make a decision that has very, very low variance. But really what it's doing is it's just changing you from a really bad win to a slightly less, or from a really bad loss to a slightly less bad loss. You're just losing by a little less. And that's not what matters in card games. It's just, did you win or did you not? Whereas that other side, if it doesn't work out, you're going to get absolutely dumpstered. But again, that also doesn't matter relative to other types of losing. But maybe it gives you an extra 2% to actually cross that variance threshold to win.
Yeah,
I think
I
there's so many
guess
scenarios like that.
I mean, I've had those scenarios where, like, I guess that's a good example where you get endless on your stealth tomb, and then you can win, otherwise you can't. I mean, I don't know if that's the best example, but I don't know if that's introducing variance more. Like, I think in that case, you don't really have a choice. Like, if you don't get it and you lose, then it's not really variance to go for it.
So
It's
what
just,
it is, when I'm explaining variance, is essentially variance in the degree to which it basically variance in your performance against the game, but then recognizing that that variance is irrelevant in the face of the binary matter of did you win or did you not, and how do we increase the percentages on each end of that, so that like obviously there is variance and people can kind of generally accept like, wow, I didn't even come close to winning this run, or wow, I absolutely dumpstered this run. And there is some variance in that. There's variance in how your deck performs in any specific fight or in a run overall. And that is something that you can expand in scenarios where you're behind and reduce in scenarios where you're ahead, to then, increase or maintain those percentages at the very top end or at the very low end, depending on which one you're concerned about. Again, if you're concerned about just those low end scenarios where you roll really, really bad, it's best to avoid variance, because then what you're doing is you're not shifting that delta out, and you're not putting more area of your curve, of your variance curve, below that threshold of unluckiness where you could possibly lose. If you're in a bad scenario, it's generally better to embrace more of it. And I think the prime example of this, the one I get asked the most, I would say probably the most common question in my chat is, how do I evaluate concealed caverns when I'm looking at a ring? There are some insane things that can pop up in concealed caverns, especially relative to certain decks that you build. So I actually tend to treat concealed caverns to the highest degree in this manner of, do I need to embrace more variance and risk getting a completely useless location on one of my sides of the track? Do I really need to, or do I need to avoid it and risk, or do I need to embrace it and risk a bad location with the opportunity to get something really busted like minor refraction? Or do I just need to avoid it because all I need is, nothing terrible to happen? I just need to progress a little bit. I think that is extremely relevant with concealed caverns, but also just so many scenarios in Monster Train.
So
than other games.
I guess one thing that and this is maybe my weakness as well, is the areas where there are the most variance, I expect them to fail. Like, I run into them, I do not expect I will get copy 5 times. I do not expect I will get build a card. I do not expect I will get minor. I expect I'm going to get a plus 10 strength stone. I expect I'm going to get I don't know, an awoken, end up having to take a plus 25 health because I can't get what is it called, hollow. So I feel like I go into these assuming the worst, and so then I focus on the areas where I feel like the variance is low enough, and I build my success criteria around them. This is why, like, I don't know, I will typically hit something like 4 or 5 unit upgrade shops if I have to. I will hit 4 or 5 spell shops if I have to, because that to me is very low variance. I don't think I've ever. I mean, stream, you can tell me. I don't think I've ever decided on a path because of a concealed caverns in my entire history playing this game. I don't think I've once done that, because for me it's such a wide variance that I refuse to rely on a concealed caverns as a win condition for my build. And so I don't know if Narninian, Gabriot, if you guys have different opinions, but I typically build around everything is going to go wrong. And so this is the minimum. This is the minimum I'm going to need to survive. And if something happens, I will pivot. I will pivot hard if I get the opportunity, but I never expect it. I always plan around worst possible scenarios. What do I do in that situation?
yeah, I mean, the caverns for me is more like if I'm on the fence about which way to go, it's like, okay, yeah, it's kind of like pyre health to me. Like I would like higher health, but I usually won't go to that path to get it unless I'm about to die. Caverns is like, well, I want to go to both merchants. I can go to the other one later. I might as well go to the one with the caverns now. So it's like a bonus, not a reason to take it for me.
I think playing to your outs it's a difficult lesson learned, because people tend to play every type of card games from the perspective of I'm trying to not lose rather than I'm trying to actually win. That applies less to Monster Train than it does to other games, but the fundamental premise of, what did you win or did you not really does apply. And there's a lot of scenarios that I see people run into where they're evaluating Cavern just as being, no value or it's a tiebreaker. And then they go to the side of the ring and their run is really not in a good place. And I feel like what's happening there is they're going to a side and they're changing a 0%er into a 0%er that feels less bad when they could go to a cavern or take an artifact from a divine horde and change their 0%er into a 2%er. It's really, really marginal, but those can save runs. I've had specific runs where I knew I was not going to be able to beat Divinity, and I just took 2 rings in a row, ignoring everything else in them, just going for concealed caverns because I knew I could win with a minor refraction. I knew it was going to be a guaranteed win if I got it. It's a very small percentage, but if your other option is changing a 0%er into a different 0%er, then you might as well.
That's not. I mean, it's a fair point.
Well,
It's
hard to say that you're changing a 0%er into a 0%er though. Like when, let's say you're on ring 7, right? You, in that scenario, you're looking at rings 6 and 7, 2 concealed caverns in a row. You're going to get rare cards after ring 6. You could get a rare card after ring 7. So those could be your outs as well. So I wouldn't say that you have a 0% chance of success if you're beating the ring.
Yeah,
that's just my opinion.
I mean, that's for me. Like here is my personal this tends to be how I play. Is my win conditions are almost always going to be very focused narrowly on a handful of things. Typically, it's going to be your priority unit or priority units if you have the luxury of having more than one. And then it's the spells that support your champion plus your unit being able to basically dominate the ring. And so what are all of the main factors that you can do to improve your odds? Number 1 is improving reliability of your draws, which is the best way to do that is remove. And it's the guarantee. You know if you get a removal, you get to remove 2 cards and improve your variance. Full stop. There's no RNG there. You take that, it's guaranteed. And if, for me, I have, and this is this is over time, just what I have experienced, is removal is significantly underrated by newer players, and it is probably one of the most important things in this game to get good, is knowing when and what to remove. I like the cavern scenario for me, similar to what Narninian said. I think there are more reliable outs than caverns events, even in the worst of dire scenarios. And I don't know. I think that Hail Marrying in Monster Train for me, I will Hail Mary tactical combat. I very, very rarely Hail Mary my strategic decision making. And I said it could be a weakness of mine, but I rarely do that. I will rarely Hail Mary on the strategic side. I will absolutely on the tactical side. If I'm getting trashed in a never give up challenge, I will do some insane stuff to see if I can get it to tactically succeed. But I rarely do that on the strategic side. I usually am much more like, what is the most reliable way to improve my deck? And even if it's marginal, I will take the reliable improvement over a Hail Mary almost every time. That's personal. As I said, could also be my weakness. Could be why I don't always win when I should. But that's typically my mentality. And then on the tactical side, balls to the walls, I will do risky stuff to get things to play out. But I don't know. Gabriot, you are chatting away, but I'm curious your input on this whole discussion.
I got sidetracked. We're talking about Into the Breach and how it relates to what we're talking about.
So I'll make one quick note, and then we can just move to the next topic, because we will. At least on my end, I'll have to wrap this up soon. But I definitely don't mean for this, by the way, to be a thesis on concealed caverns specifically. It's a combination of thousands of different very, very marginal scenarios that all add up to give you a couple extra win percentage. So another quick example could be something like taking another banner unit when you already have one, and if you don't draw your built up banner unit in the first turn, then you're absolutely screwed. So if you don't draw these cards in a specific order, you're 100% dead. But you know you're not going to win that fight regardless, and the combination of these 2 banner units can actually get you there. That's another scenario where you're giving yourself a 50-50 shot to die, but if you think you were already going to die regardless, you might as well take that 50-50 over, that, like even to Narninian's point, if it's not 0%, maybe a 5 or 10%er to win that fight. If you know you were probably going to lose to some leaks or something like that, you might as well take that 50% shot to get yourself out of it, even though it does just mean certain death if it doesn't work out. Still better odds. But yeah, definitely not specific to concealed caverns. Just I think it's a good general lesson to, and obviously this is just a big rule of thumb. It's my takeaway would be embrace variance when you're in a losing position and avoid variance when you're in a winning position. Obviously, variance is generally good to reduce in ways that it consistently increases your win percentage. So things like card removal. Unstable vortexes are reductions in variance that increase the percentage odds to win in all possible scenarios. But there are some where you're increasing your odds to win and increasing your odds to lose by a lot. And generally, those are things that are better to embrace or avoid given your position in the game. So unless anyone has any last notes, we can move on to the final topic, which I think is going to be a very interesting and contentious one. No, I assume Gabriot has something prepared since he said he wrote down some notes.
Oh, I sure do.
Oh, man. And also, everyone already knows my answer, so mine's going to be much more lame. So we're going to discuss what we think are currently the single best and worst deck combos in the entire game.
So
I'm
clan
gonna let
combos,
Gabriel lead.
clan combos, or just decks, like deck archetypes.
You can do either. I'm gonna stick to clan combos myself. I think there are some mechanics that don't work, and we could discuss those separately. But let's try to stick to a more general, like, if your life is on the line, what clan combos when you're about to start a run feel the most risky and least risky to you? I'm gonna start with Gabriot because he's the most prepared.
Yeah, I'm more confident in my strong pick, least confident in my weak pick, but my strong pick is Melting Exiled and Awoken Exiled.
Yep.
I think Little Fade has the most consistency of all the champs. Every path is good. You can mix between paths. I think Melting Remnant and Awoken, in a general sense, are my picks for the 2 strongest clans. They have really good units, infusions. They have good banners, good non-banners. Like Draft is insane. Tombs are insane. There's card draw. There's Hallowed Halls. You just find Hallowed Halls, you win. There's heals. Just insanity. Sweepers. Yeah.
Like
sweepers with Firelight. Icarus.
Like you even have artifacts that deal with, like, the 2 artifacts that just let you ignore the diligence downside.
Right. Exactly.
Quick. I think that's a great combo, and probably what'll be a very consistent theme as we're discussing this are what clan combos give you actual value out of your starter cards, and you can definitely do worse than Primitive Mold Root Seeds. Those 2 cards are absolutely insane.
Yep.
Yep. Those have my vote for 2 best.
Definitely a great combo. Also, you have a nice split there of some good front line and back line damage, which is like a classic aspect of the game that people often tend to forget about because us, like, a lot of the old school players experienced the time of it just being a Woken Hellhorn. So you had the front line faction, the back line faction, and now we have all these hybrid units. We've got the Sirens of the Sea and whatnot. And I think people have undervalued having a consistent way to acquire common and uncommon frontliners and common and uncommon backliners. I think that's a very good combo. Let's go to Narninian next.
I mean,
plus Nate has something to say on that combo.
That combo is super strong. I'll say, you probably roll your eyes, but I'm going to say Sentient Primary, Stygian Secondary would be pretty strong as well. Mm-hmm. I prefer Explosive, but Cultivating is fine because of Stygian incanting. Basically, you get draw, you get, and the Cultivate part is almost a bonus, right?
Do you go Forgotten Power or Spears?
Spears.
I mean, I don't choose, but I guess I would choose the not Forgotten Power one. What is it? Frozen Lance? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Forgotten Power's rough.
My favorite, or my most consistent combo is Standard Stygian with Root Seeds. and I go Conduit 100% of the time.
Yeah, Conduit, I'm surprised how easy it is to keep Tethys alive on the top floor. Like,
She lives.
I always find an answer.
Always,
Like-
there's always an answer. You get intrinsic,
You
whatever.
get sap, you get...
Doesn't matter.
Like, what? Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I guess turn 1, sometimes if you're relying on like an armor totem or something, but I've gone runs where I just don't play Tethys on turn 1. That's fine.
I actually think that Conduit Tethys is the single most underrated champion upgrade path in the game right now.
I don't think it's underrated
specifically-
anymore. I made a whole video about it. I think Conduit Tethys is the best champion upgrade path. But the problem is that what you get laden down with Conduit Tethys is you don't get Conduit Tethys, and the other two Tethys paths are so bad right now. They're so bad right now.
Yeah.
That if you don't get Conduit, you lose.
I'll take even the sweep path. Like, it's nice to be guaranteed a sweeper, but spikes will kill Tethys. I want to add on to my answer though. Like, I'll just say that melting exiled in any position, primary, secondary, I would say super strong. Like
Root seeds and primitive mold are the two single best, and it's not even like it's close. They are so much better than every other starter card.
Agreed.
Hands down. The one exception is that Queen's Imps have a really actually pretty strong essence, but that's it.
Yeah, but that's more the queen.
Yeah.
Like, I think like secondary queen simplings, they're okay, but 40 damage isn't like game breaking.
Yeah, I mean, it depends, but in talking about this, I've recommended, this is not the question. The question was clan combos, but I'm going to throw this out there. I think, based on the experience, I think that Dreg and Wicklash need to be swapped, and I think Wicklash needs to be a +5 damage, +1 burnout starter card for Rector Flicker, and Dreg needs to be buffed and made a common unit, and I think it changes the whole world for Rector Flicker. That would be like my #1 change in this game that I think would dramatically improve. And it's honestly exclusively because Burnout Rector Flicker is so bad if you don't have any Burnout Extension or Reform. And you can have...
Yeah, and I'll add that, like, even Dark Calling, dregs are awful. Like even with Dark Calling, like, they're just not... You disagree? Really? Okay. Well,
so,
I don't like Dark Calling.
Gab, you want to go first for me? I think we're going to disagree for different reasons.
Papos Penguin on this call to defend this one.
I don't think it's that dregs are terrible. I think again, the fact that you can have a starter, and maybe this is my worst. I think one of the problems with standard Melting Remnant is while Rector Flicker, 2 of Rector Flicker's paths are incredibly powerful right now. Dark Calling and Accumulator are so good. Burn Bright cannot be played in almost any circumstance, and it's made worse that you have to draw a Burnout Extender or you have to draw a Reform.
Well, okay, and I will say this: there are common, uncommon, and rare options for both Reform and Burnout Extension. There's so much that you are not guaranteed, but nearly guaranteed to get something. And then with the shards, you can make that something enough. But I agree, it's ring 1 is awful. Like, you're not guaranteed to, even if you don't play your champ, like, you're not going to be guaranteed to draw your champ in the second cycle of your deck, even if you play literally every card in your deck to remove it from your draw. So it is very weak turn 1 if you don't have one of those cards.
I think my main problem with Burnout Rector is just the stats aren't on par. Similar to the other 2 Tethys paths. It's like the stats just don't keep up with the DLC.
Right. At least Monstrous has big stat stick, but at least it's got trample.
Yes. Right.
So
right.
Yeah.
Which makes me think maybe Burnout should have trample, or at least maybe like the 3rd upgrade gets a multi-strike stack, like 1 maybe. Would that be too crazy? I feel like not.
Or just give it
trample
an
on
extra burnout. Like give it more burnout, initial burnout. Like
It
Something.
could, but even then, I think the stats kind of suck, right? Like you can't even kill a tank with it in the last fight.
So I'm gonna agree. I'm gonna agree real quick that I think there should be some kind of change to Burn Bright, something to make him more consistently pickable, because he is in his current state removing a lot of the decision making, I think, from your Dark Forge, from your first Dark Forge.
or
Even some later Dark Forges.
built-in gain rage when you lose a stack of burnout.
So
something.
my argument to not do it with Dreg, I think that it's really, really nice when this game has and there's so much good design here in Monster Train of adding very, very small card packages or small elements to the game that allow whole archetypes to spawn in a very isolated area. They don't cost a lot, and I think there's an entire archetype here that is completely lost if Dreg is not a starter card, which is having Dreg Queen Zimpling as your starter card, which then leaves you with a 0 to 3 or 0 to 5 card deck of 2 to 7 card deck of cards after your first cycle, assuming you can deploy things pretty efficiently. There are some sweet builds that you can go with having Drag Queen Zimpling get out of your deck in the first cycle, and then making a very spells-based deck that just does its thing consistently every turn. I think that's a really, really interesting archetype, and even if it's not the most powerful,
I mean, you can do that.
as fun as some other archetypes. Yeah. So and it's without investing other card draw, because you can do it in the first fight. It's very, very possible to actually start doing it, or no, second fight, I think. I think it's just a really interesting archetype that spawns up from having the potential for so many units in your starting deck, and I wouldn't want to see that lost to a change just to try and increase the viability and decision making related to the champion as opposed to the starter card itself. Obviously, Dreg is in a pretty weak spot, but I think that's it's a little nugget of the game that would be lost to changing Dreg out.
So you have not said viable your combo. What's your strongest?
Yep. So everyone already knows what is not only my favorite combo, but the one I think is the strongest. It's Shardtail Queen Primitive Mold. We can discuss the merits of the deck. I do want to quickly give an honorable mention because it also goes in hand with what Nate is saying. My second favorite deck, and I think probably top 5 most powerful decks, is actually Tethys plus either Torch or Echo Break, and Torch being the primary one. This is a deck, and it's Conduit Tethys specifically is the build you go for. This deck actually gives you really good utility out of your starter cards, even into the late game if you go for an incant build. Having these cards cost 0 mana and being able to play every card in your hand very consistently,
and having
is
armor,
really powerful.
Armor synergies from Hellhorn with incant armor,
it's just really strong.
So I'm gonna give a quick honorable mention to Tethys Torch. But I've said a lot of things I could say about Shardtail Queen Primitive Mold. If you guys have some input on the clan or your thoughts on it.
I mean,
I'm sure people are tired of me talking about it.
I think Exiled Melting, like I said, any position, super, super strong. And that's part of your, clan combination, Exiled Melting. So,
someone's asking in chat what are the absolute worst ones. I mean, Plink is the worst.
Oh, here we go.
Plink is the worst starter card of the game. Someone was just asking what's the worst starter card. Plink is worst.
But
I actually disagree. Interestingly enough,
I think with pre-DLC, it was tied with a couple others. I think post-DLC, I think it's the worst because you can't. They're even like Ring 1. If you take the thing, you might get sharded units that you can't kill.
I'm not a huge fan of Foregone Power.
I think Foregone Power is the worst one for my money, or Dreg. My issue with Foregone Power, specifically being they work very poorly in multiples, and you're guaranteed to have multiples. It also leans you towards a strategy. Card discard is a strategy where you don't want to be glutted on enablers. You want to be glutted on payoffs. So you can't actually take more enablers into the strategy that the Foregone Power is trying to lean you into because they don't synergize well with each other or the Foregone Power. It just kind of possibly enables you to use. Yeah. So I actually think Plink is in a fine space. It definitely gets a lot of hate. The thing about Plink is it has this weird reverse scaling to it. So it's a card that takes magic power decently well. But I think the cap on its high end and the cap on its low end in your first couple of fights are possibly the highest and the lowest. The things that Plink can do in those first couple of fights or against like mid to late or early to mid market invasions are really, really insane. It does things that you're not doing with other cards, and especially not any other starter card. I mean, killing two things and getting two morsels is just really insane value, and that happens more than a lot of people think, or even just a single slay and a single morsel. It's in an awkward design space because of things like armor trial or shards, which can just completely invalidate it. But I think it's in a fine space power level wise. It just has kind of a reverse scaling to it. It starts off either being really strong or it can scale well into the late game, but it tends to do one and not the other.
I think the one issue with Plink that I have with its long term, even like, is the fact that it can hit flying bosses can really screw things up. And I think this is not just a Plink only thing. There are artifacts
like treatment.
I mean, what's the artifact? The Gorge artifact that always hits the back.
Yeah, the one where
Teeth of Gold.
I really think they need to remove some of those from being able to target the boss, especially now the divinity is guaranteed to be on the floor every turn. So gold teeth is absolutely completely useless in divinity. Like, no matter where you set up.
So I think that's part of why I don't like Plink, because it loses consistency, specifically in flying bosses. And the other one is just like, it's the only starter card that you how do I say this? You have so little control over what happens, and it's the most feels bad card. So even if it is the best, even if it has the highest win rate, the fact that it is the only one that has pure RNG like that, I guess that's not true. Primitive mold is the other one. But the difference between a primitive mold and a Plink is a primitive mold, you're guaranteed something. It might not be what you wanted. A Plink, you can get absolutely nothing sometimes. So it's I don't know. Who is this demon VTuber? This is Narninian. That was the word, by the way, I was asking about earlier. It's called VTuber is the word.
All right, so very last point will be worst clan combos. So my pick, I guess we'll just go in reverse order. My pick is going to be Wildenton Dreg. So I'm going to go Exiled Awoken. Normal.
Whoa! I don't hate
Wildenton Dreg.
What? Okay. Sorry.
I can give up.
I think Melting is so over the top amazing with Wildenton that I will have to strongly disagree. I don't care what you start with.
Yes, you need a stealth tomb.
Or you don't even need a stealth tomb. You just need a tomb. You need a tomb.
Or a baron, or
For me, it's combinations of clans that have one of two problems. One, either one of your strategies wants things to die and clear up space, and the other doesn't. Or actually, it's basically just, either your strategy wants to fill up its space, or your strategy wants to have available space, or your strategy wants things to die or not have things die. I think there's a lot of clan combos that pull you in those two different directions. The specific choice of Wildenton Dreg is more specific to me. I think that's the one I would perform worse with, but I think there's a lot of merit to combinations of Umbra, Melting Remnant, and Awoken that can be really, really awkward. Essentially, just those three, assuming you're not playing a really, really busted champion like Little Icarus or Little Fate. Which is just Little Icarus a lot of the time.
I mean, I could see. I don't know about the worst. It's just there's so many good runs with Wildenton and Melting, but I mean, you could just not get any of those cards that make it good. So
that's very true. But
Rippinator said the gauntlet has been thrown.
I think so. The problem is that my favorite build to play is the Stealth Tomb Wildenton build, which I think is. It's if you get it, if you starter card Stealth Tomb and you have Wildenton and you get specifically what's the sweep and root, it's just an auto win, even against Divinity. Unless you get like the worst possible everything else in the whole rest of the game, you're going to win because you'll never take pyre damage. But no, I don't know. I can agree with that though. If you don't get it, it's pretty bad. Wildenton in general is one of the most awkward champions to play around. He just the thing with Wildenton is that he has root seeds, and it's hard to deny the fact that root seeds is just so damn good. It's such a good starter card. It's hard.
There's definitely a good secondary consideration, and I would say it's very close between that and if I was not taking my own play skill with specific champions and factions into play, probably Penumbra Awoken is a pretty rough one for very similar reasons.
I think
Sorry, Penumbra Restore.
apart from the fact that Exile Melting Remnant is just good on its own, the least good with it is Umbra in general, and especially Plink Umbra, because with several of them you don't want to actually get morsels at all. Morsels are like actively bad in a lot of Melting Remnant builds. That tends to be just an awkward combo, but the thing is that Melting Remnant is so internally strong, it's hard to ever say that a combo with Melting Remnant is bad, because it's just such a strong clan. It's one of those where you can literally ignore your secondary clan, and it's so internally consistent and strong. I think for me,
All right.
I think
You got to get your pick in. You got to throw your gauntlet, Nate.
I think my pick for the most difficult right now is Hornbreaker Prince with Exile Wormkin. And I think Wormkin Exile in general is really awkward. I think all the Wormkin mechanics are designed around their champions in a way that is maybe a little bit more tied than the other clans. So like Etch, like if you get a lot of consume cards, there's 2 units that have Etch. But if you have a champion that has Etch with eggs, then it's like really good. Similar, like the whole consume combo thing is designed around Echo Right and some of the combos there. And I feel like, especially with a Hornbreaker Prince, it like doesn't fit. And Hornbreaker Prince, I think, is one of those champions that you really take a lot of value from your secondary clan to make Hornbreaker Prince work these days. More so than in the past. The days of just like getting a Wrathful Prince and having it just pwn everything is over. And Hornbreaker needs a lot of support from its secondary clan, and Wormkin just doesn't give it in the levels that I think it needs. There are some really good like combos that you can still do, and it's not that it's not like, I think all the combos can win, but I think Hornbreaker is in a not very good spot, and I think Wormkin doesn't do any favors.
It's also very worth noting with that combo that if you're trying to do anything with echoes and infused cards, any combination of starter cards you could possibly have if you're running Hornbreaker Prince, Wormkin, do not play well on floors where there are no enemy units, which is a thing that occurs a lot. You really want to set yourself up with those echoes early on, and if you're looking at a pile of torches and fractures or torches and echo breaks, it can be really awkward.
Yeah, and as I said, like I think right now, if I were to like, excluding clan combos, just looking at pure champion reliability, the Prince went from being like, I would say, in like the top 3 to being in like the bottom 2. I think he's very, very unreliable these days, and it makes it really difficult when then you have a supporting clan that's not going to address his weaknesses. So this is for me what can be really difficult. Yeah, so that would be my pick, is Hornbreaker Prince plus Exile, and it doesn't matter which one, or Hornbreaker Prince plus Wormkin, and I don't care which one, whether it's Echo Break or what is it now called? It's not called Sharded anymore. It's called
Sharded.
Actually, yeah, I still call it Sharded. Even when I don't forget, I still call it Sharded. Actually, I especially call it Sharded when I don't forget that it used to be called Sharded. All right, Narninian, what is your gauntlet? What portion of the player base that is making bad mistakes are going to hate you now?
Okay, so you're saying what clan combination is bad?
Yes.
What is the worst one? If you had to play one right now and your life was on the line, what is going to make you the most uncomfortable? Or if it's anyone has to play it, what do you think is the worst?
That's tough. I didn't think about this one too much. I'm just looking at the logbook here.
We can jump to Gabriot then and give you a second.
Yeah, jump to Gabriot and let me look.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar to Nate's Hellhorned Prince primary. I just for my money, I think Plink secondary is worse than Wormkin. My reasons are, I agree with the sort of situationalist. I don't even know what word I'm trying to say. The situationality of what you kind of talked about with Wormkin. I just think there's more with Umbra. I think almost every Umbra unit needs morsels to do anything, and with Plinks, you're not guaranteed good morsel generation. You also have just a set of, Torch and Plink in the DLC are not going to kill anything without upgrades. So they sort of beg to be removed. Torch can still hurt your own units, but I find that less useful in the DLC. And kind of like you talked about, Hellhorn Prince just kind of isn't that consistent anymore. I think full Brawler is pretty powerful if you have Ritual Battle. Otherwise...
Or imps or whatever. You need some way to scale.
Or imps, right. Some sort of rage scaling, which isn't guaranteed. You might get it, but you also... I would argue Brawler's start isn't powerful, so you can lose games at the start by starting Brawler. I mean, you get a little bit of armor, a little bit of stats, but if you didn't start with Ritual, you didn't start with Fledgling Imp, you're kind of screwed sometimes. And Plinks and Torches aren't going to help you damage the boss. It's not going to help you damage sharded up units. I think it's still potentially powerful. I mean, you got double multi-strike cards that you could hit on. It's why I'm less confident about saying like which one is weakest. It could just be also that I just suck with the combo, but it's definitely my vote.
I would say there's the real big cost there is actually just being stuck with Hornbreaker Prince as your champion in that combo. I don't think he plays well, but I think the combination of Torch Plink is actually extremely underrated. The ability to set up Plinks, I think, is really, really strong in helping non-upgraded Plinks scale into the mid and late game, or even just do some work early game. Also, you get this nice balance of already having consistent ways to deal with tiny backliners for those first couple of rings at least, which then lets you focus your game plan a little bit more on building up your relentless fight early on. But I still think the combo's bad overall. I don't know if it's as much a cost of Torch Plink as it is Hornbreaker Prince and the awkward anti-synergies between Hellhorn units and Gorging.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the logbook here, and I guess Penumbra as a champion has some potential bad, like if they don't get Architect and they don't have if they're relying on Glutton, it might be challenging. And then with Wormkin secondary, like if you're relying on, I feel like there's a lot of bad options you could be offered with that combination. But I think Umbra has a lot of strong cards still, and I'm just not super familiar with making Wormkin work in a secondary position.
That's a valid point. Like Penumbra, I would say he's not quite as bad as Hornbreaker Prince, but he's certainly a lot worse going into DLC than he was before. Except Architect. Architect is just insanely strong, but the other two paths they both struggle. I will say there's something to be said about Architect 2 with Monstrous 1. I think that's actually legitimately good, but which is funny because I would have never done that pre-DLC, but now I find it quite strong. But the in general, Gorge the Penumbra, and to anyone who wants to defend it, the only way you can make Gorge the Penumbra work is with artifacts. You cannot, without the right artifacts, you cannot run Gorge Penumbra. It's not possible against Divinity because he will die. He will die on every floor. Every floor will kill him turn 1. And will kill every morsel turn 1. So it's where you could reliably get him on the top floor. He would mostly survive Seraph. You cannot do that with Divinity. And this to me is a big problem. And I think there needs to be something done to address this. I don't know what it needs to be done. There's a couple of these champions that right now are just in, like, their champion upgrade paths are so far behind. There needs to be some tuning to make things work again. I mean, Slay Hornbreaker Prince is up there. Gorge Penumbra is up there. If you make them work, you make them work in freak offshoot decks that rely on architects. Artifacts, that rely on artifacts to survive. So, and I don't think that's really healthy. I think artifacts should be a boon, not a mandatory thing to make a champion upgrade path work. And there are some that currently are that situation.
All right. I'm going to hit this with one last question before I sign off here, at least. This is going to be something a little more lighthearted. I just thought of it, or at least a little bit recently, so no one had time to prepare, and this is going to be a tough one to tackle. What busted thing in the game, because this comes up a lot in Magic, what busted thing in the game that has been patched or nerfed into oblivion would you like to see come back, at least for a little bit of time, to experience the nostalgia of it again? And I'll lead on mine, which is actually going to be morsels counting as dying units and going to the reform pile.
It'd be fun.
I miss the days. I just thought it was a really like fun clan combo. It was kind of an awkward release when both of those clans come out at the same time and they interact with each other in such a busted way that just like and didn't interact with the other clans at all. But it was just so much fun, and also selecting morsels I think to reform was just a great time. Also, it made a dark calling on a Rector Flicker really insane. That was my like OG favorite deck was dark calling Rector Flicker and just bringing back 1, 2, and 3 morsels a turn. I also kind of miss old Rector Flicker, but that's a separate thing. Yeah, that's gonna be my pick.
I miss beta and graft. Immediately drawing cards.
I was gonna say that, and then you just have 2 in grafts,
and you win.
Yeah, and you win. That was literally every time I played in beta. It's like, all right, I have in graft, I won.
Oh man, back to beta. Another good one was Multi-Strike 4 Hornbreaker Prince. Imagine root seeds with that thing. Holy cow! You just go ham with your champion.
I mean,
right.
Multi-Strike 4 Prince already exists. What?
Wait, I thought he got changed out.
No, he's still 4.
Rank
he's
3,
5.
4.
He strikes 5.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't. They did a full rework on Hornbreaker, and I can't remember anything about him anymore since they changed him.
Brawler.
Wait, what was the other mode? There was Slay Armor. It was just Slay Armor, Multi-Strike, and what was the other?
It was Wrathful, but it was Wrathful without the armor Slay. It was just gain rage on Revenge. But then they switched it so that he also had the Slay trigger to gain armor, I think, if I remember right. Am I remembering right, or am I wrong there? I can't remember.
I think he always gained armor. I think he just maybe the rage is new. I don't
remember.
Yeah, that definitely changed. He didn't have the revenge trigger. I'm not sure he interacted with rage at all before. It's been a while. I remember I would always just go multi-strike and slay armor, or just multi-strike. Oh no, it was just damage. It was slay and damage was one. So like he would become stronger and he would get slay triggers that made him stronger, or he would stay small and have multi-strike, or he would get armor on slay. It was those 3. He had one that was every time he slayed, you got like plus 100 attack, or it was plus 50 attack. His final form on that one. And then you had one that was slay to gain 25 armor, and then one that just gave you 2 extra stacks of multi-strike. Those were the final forms. I like old Prince, but I'm still going to go with Morsel's Dying. I do appreciate old Ingress.
Although that would be super awful against that one wave of Divinity.
Yes. Yeah. Although I think Gorges still happened at the end, though, so it might not be terrible. Certainly not as bad as before. I feel like there's a lot more ways to deal with things during combat than there used to be. But Gabriot, what's your
a way to? I'm gonna say that would be a way to make your morsels actually insulated from Divinity Sweep once you reform them a couple times. Not a super reliable way to do it, but possible. Yeah. So Narninian or Gabriot, what we got?
I mean,
I was gonna say Engraft, so I'm not gonna come up with a new one.
I mean, I didn't play in beta, so I have to go with early, just Monster Train. So mine's a 2-way tie. I can't choose between them. Volatile Gauge or 1-cost Lodestone Totem.
Oh my gosh. Oh my god!
I'll choose for you then. I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go with 1-cost Lodestone Totem.
I don't know. Like original Volatile Gauge was a blast.
Snecko with an additional draw.
Yeah,
which was already busted in Slay the Spire.
I'm actually wondering if they brought it back. If they brought it back, do you think it would be as oppressive anymore?
I think so. Just because I can run the current version pretty well a lot of the time. I think they could maybe bring it to 0 to 4. I would like that more. I think that would give it a buff overall. Because them coming in at 0 is such an advantage, and if they come in at 4, I'm down with that downside. Just you can upgrade your Ember to get around that. But I think it would be an overall upgrade to go 0 to 4.
Weren't you originally able to in beta reduce the cost of units as well? in shops?
Yes, I remember. I missed that as well. That was a lot of
I
fun.
don't
Man.
I don't miss that.
Oh,
Uh,
double stacking enhancements. When you could double stack
oh yeah.
enhancements, that was sick. And you could
Oh,
get this
double stack that doesn't increase the cost.
original.
Oh yeah, that's good.
That was actually
Consumption
really
removal
good.
that doesn't increase costs is also sweet.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, a lot of the other stuff, I feel like there's some things that were nerfed I think made a lot of sense. Obviously, Sap Totem being 3 cost. I think we've learned that it's still incredibly powerful, but it's just not as oppressive. Furnace Tap is still. It's honestly not. I don't find it the king anymore, though. It might not be the best card anymore.
It's tougher to pull off Ember Drain with the because I used to use, if I didn't find perils, Mind Collapse was pretty consistent. It's kind of hard now to get Mind Collapse to rely on your way out of Ember Drain.
Yeah.
I mean, you need really a piercing upgrade. Even then, it's like you either need the 30 and the piercing and holdover. You can't have both unless you get the 3 cost or the 3 stack artifact. So it's pretty hard to pull off Ember Drain now without perils.
I think what we've established is they should just have like a week or maybe a separate game mode where they just undo all of the biggest nerfs in the game for a week. We'll play it for a little while. We'll get our fill of being absolutely broken, and then we'll go back to, lamenting the change to shops. And
I mean, you could just
removal.
you can make a mod.
You could.
That's a big mod.
It's
Unnerved
not
One
really.
Horn's Tome is another one recommended.
There's one that has a balance configurator that might make it easy. I don't know.
It was interesting when One Horn's Tome was 3 mana. I didn't feel like it was that overpowered. Honestly, I didn't take it that often.
It also didn't apply Fragile.
Yeah, I think
That's true.
apply Fragile, bring it back to 3 costs, and it's perfectly fine. I think the fact that it's 5 cost and in addition applies Fragile is a little bit over the top. It's just so much objectively worse than Furnace Tap, which is interesting. But anyway, yeah, I think so. Not the question that was asked, but if I were to say what are the things that I would address if I were the devs in the current state, my top picks would be Slay Hornbreaker Prince, which is unplayable in any rank, in any build. It is probably Gorge Penumbra as second. And I don't know, what would you guys want to address? Like, those are my 2 ones that I just feel like I feel bad because they at least were playable pre-DLC, but they're just not.
I mean,
Burnout Rector.
Yeah,
I guess
Burnout
Titan
Rector,
Channel is
Burnout
fine
Rector.
because the base stats are pretty strong.
I love Titan Channel. I almost exclusively take it, but
I like avoiding Everdrain on turn 1 so much.
yeah, it's amazing. It's so good.
But it is like that 60 damage difference between it and Burnout Rector is pretty big, I think. And also just Stygian in general is able to, I don't know. I'm trying to think of why we're okay with Titan Channel and not Burnout Rector, and I guess it's because the requirements are more specific.
Well, I think
Also not built into your deck.
Rank 1 is
I
so
don't-
much easier to make work. I feel like Rank 1's Soulguard is Titan Channel 1 is easy, and Burnout Rank 1. If you draw bad, you lose, and you can't draw so bad you don't get Tethys online with 4 incants.
Well, I also think, if I recall correctly, Titan Channel still kills a tank,
Yes.
at least, and tanks more damage. And I feel like that just pushes it so much over the edge. If you don't have sweep or big AoE, one tank getting through is so much damage to your pyre, and if you can mitigate that last tank, that's so huge.
And he doesn't he just chills. He chills up there by himself, doesn't get touched for 3 or 4 turns, and then he just shows up and he's huge. And you play Burn Bright Rector Flicker rank 3 on the top floor. Even before he's touched an enemy, he's down like a third of his health. Like, it just is, it really feels bad. And I think it's You can't play him on the second floor. I don't know. I don't know what you do with him. I will say I sometimes will take him as a rank 1. I will like 1 rank of Burn Bright I think is okay, and then you mix it with Accumulator, and that can be okay if you have Burnout Extension, because then you actually end up with a much bigger Burn Bright than you ever would have had with rank 3 Burn Bright. That works, but I don't know. Accumulator is just so much better. It does the same thing. It just does it way better and way more reliably. I don't know.
So for me, there's 2 types of changes. Like if I was asked to approach the devs and give a change recommendation, there's a couple of types. They kind of trade off with one another, so they both have merit. One are the types of changes that are really, really big and lofty and changes came in a fundamental way, but are very tough to implement. And then there are ones that are really, really minor, quick fixes and make small improvements. I think that both of these are generally equally valuable, assuming that the weighted costs and benefits are roughly proportionate to one another. Because you do have to think that the devs do have a very finite amount of development time. So in general, you can kind of get a bunch of small things fixed or one big thing fixed. So my more steady one would be a little bit more future-proofing and non-bold keyword creation to make the game a little more uniform. There's an interesting thing where for like Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh, it takes forever to actually learn the rule set in a way that allows you to understand every single possible scenario. But it's more like a language. It's like learning a coding language. Once you've learned the actual language of the rules, then you can understand how to apply those rules to every single scenario, as opposed to having to tackle specific scenarios. Some examples of awkward wording are things that a few of us have discussed recently. So the way like melee weakness, spell weakness, and spell shield all kind of work is a little weird. I would like to see words like strike or attack or stuff like that fleshed out and given very, very targeted meanings that allow us to read cards and understand the way they interact with other cards without having to experiment or figure that out on our own. And I don't think it's too tough to implement. It's just a matter of setting aside words and using them only for specific purposes, which is what most card games do. The bigger one, which is obviously a much loftier change and is a thing we've also discussed quite a bit, is adding endless mode, preferably something that grinds the game down to being unwinnable even with an infinite combo deck after a couple more rings, but just creating something that allows us to shift away from score and align the play patterns of high and low level play without fundamentally changing the game. I think is very, very big. But again, much tougher to implement, so both changes have really, really good value to them. Is the implementation time versus the benefit, I think, is different.
I'm not sure. I'm not sold on infinite mode being super great. Mainly because I don't know. I think it'd be a lot of resources spent to making it work, and then once you've done it once, it'll be boring. That's my opinion.
I think what could make it more interesting is more like the competitive, where you're influencing each other's builds, influencing each other's enemies. That could make it more dynamic, and maybe you don't even have to make it endless. You just make it really hard, and that you can mess people up. Like, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure how you would do that, but something like that. Like, I almost wonder, like, maybe you don't have an endless number of rings, but you just have the last divinity have infinite health, and first one to die in that fight. There's no relentless. You just keep doing one turn at a time, and you can mess with each other. Maybe that's the way to do it. I don't know, but something that makes it more dynamic. Then that's more interesting to replay it than just playing in those ways.
So the actual specific idea, and it's even harder in implementation than what I was explaining might have come off as, was an actual progression, both for the people that like the game in a competitive sense and the survival aspect of the game, but also for people that like the lore of the game. So my actual more specific thought was you start climbing back out of hell, and the waves that are spawning are much tougher than before and actually involve a lot of the units that you can draft. So you're actually fighting things like I don't know, alpha fiends and stuff like that, and animus of wills as you're coming up that are like enhanced versions of themselves. But it is still game building on current mechanics, use some of the current floating bosses, or build new ones that are very similar to them, and then just add more mechanics that really, really grind the game down. So stuff similar to the way like the Heart plays in Slay the Spire, where you can't just go off with most types of infinite combo decks, or even have ones that shut down infinite combo decks altogether, and try to force the game into a position where it is technically possible to play past a few more rings, but obviously we don't want the games to run too long. I think it would actually be fine to get it to a point where essentially ring like 11 or 12 is nigh unwinnable, and is absolutely unwinnable with things like infinite combo decks. I think that would be a little more interesting.
Someone was suggesting in chat that one of the easiest ways you could do is just to have shops where you send garbage. You pay coins to send trash to your opponents.
I like that, honestly. I mean, I probably wouldn't be still playing the game as much as I do if it weren't for these tournaments to look forward to. And I think on that similar vein, you take your average player and you add multiplayer, I think you give them such an incentive to keep playing, right? With not, I mean, I can develop. I'm not a game dev by any means. Like, I don't know how much lift that is, but it feels like it. You know, just a few features you could add to the current Hell Rush, and make it Covenant 25 available. I think you'd just get so much growth with this game. People would stream it more. You'd get probably bigger name content. Maybe it brings somebody like Jorbs back to test his metal against whoever is wanting to try to be the number one multiplayer guy, right?
And the biggest thing to not miss, however you want to change the game to improve competitive play and longevity in the game, the biggest thing that we've actually been discussing a lot as we're arranging these tournament rules, but also which I think applies to any possible solution you could have for this, is make sure you have granularity at the top end that does not force players into specific play patterns or play patterns that are unusual for casual play. Some way to actually distinguish who wins, and force players to lose the game, lose the survival aspect of the game, or win it to a lesser degree, that actually feels like it's in line with the normal mechanics and normal play patterns of the game. I think if you miss that, whatever thing you try to implement here, we're going to have the exact same problem where your high-level players are just playing a different game from everyone else, and content creation becomes clunky, viewing becomes clunky, longevity becomes the issue. All right, that is my final 2 cents. I'm going to have to sign off soon. Gonna go to an arcade and try to actually do something outside of my house a little bit for the weekend, because the missus gets a little stir crazy. So
outside,
Yeah,
I'm gonna get to see that in like 3 weeks.
That's
My
next week for
second
me.
vaccine comes. Oh boy.
Oh snap!
I'm not on the
man,
list
dude,
yet.
I'm gonna go watch the probably bad Mortal Kombat movie remake just to go out to a movie theater.
You have a very low bar to get over. As long as it's better than Annihilation, that's a masterpiece. So,
Oh man, Mortal Kombat Annihilation. I didn't hate the first one
No,
as
first
much
one's
as most
great.
people do, but
First one's a
Annihilation is
classic.
god.
I enjoyed the first
The
one. It was
plastic
cheesy, but
costumes. The plastic costumes. Holy cow.
the CGI was just really bad. And anyway, let's do some clunky gameplay for the rest of us, the other three. So Viable, we can unless Gabriot and Narninian, you have other stuff to do. I am happy to do.
Nope.
Oh, I got nothing to do.
All right. So do we do another eyes, hand, and brain?
Ooh, I'm down
Sure.
with that.
yep.
All right.
Give me like a minute. I gotta take the dog out real quick.
All right, and then I think it's his turn to pilot.
Yes.
Sure.
And Viable, thank you for organizing the questions and also with the tournament. And those that are watching, tournament, play.
Yeah.
Seeds are available. Get in there.
Come watch.
Or come watch.
One. If you come watch, we're excited for that too. It's gonna be me and Narninian this time, and we probably need to start preparing, but we will start preparing.